noticed, my friends, that the encounters which wound us the deepest are not random. They carry a strange precision, as if the unconscious itself had staged a meeting between two souls destined to enact an ancient drama. When the empath meets the narcissist, we are not simply watching two personalities clash. We are watching archetypes awaken from the depths of the collective unconscious, summoned to the stage of life with all the intensity of myth. I invite you to perceive this not merely as psychology, but as initiation. The empath is lured into the orbit of the narcissist not because fate is cruel, but because the psyche is trying to bring to consciousness a truth that has remained hidden. It is a test of perception, of strength, of wholeness. Why, then, do narcissists target empaths first? It is because the narcissist is starving for reflection, and the empath is a mirror of extraordinary clarity. In the empath, the narcissist sees his own grandiosity echoed back, as if at last the universe had agreed with his inflated self-image. But this mirror is deceptive, for it is not only vanity that is reflected, it is also the emptiness beneath the mask. The empath feels this emptiness with exquisite sensitivity, yet often mistakes it for a call to heal, to rescue, to redeem. This is where the trap begins. The narcissist does not consciously think, here is someone I will devour. Rather, the archetype of the predator meets the archetype of the wounded healer, and the dance commences. Imagine a dream, a vast hall filled with mirrors. In the center stands a figure clothed in gold, whose face is ever shifting, elusive, impossible to pin down. Around him gather souls who seek recognition, who long for the warmth of being seen. One approaches, luminous in her sensitivity, her heart open like a chalice. She lifts the mirror of her being, and at once the golden figure comes alive, basking in the radiance reflected back. But what she does not see is that while she is holding the mirror, the figure's hands are quietly reaching to draw her life into his emptiness. This dream is a metaphor for the unconscious attraction between narcissist and empath. The golden figure is the persona, the dazzling mask that hides the abyss. The chalice bearer is the empath, offering her soul as a mirror to confirm what is false. Such encounters are not mere accidents of personality. They are archetypal dramas, playing out the unresolved wounds of the human psyche. You must understand that the narcissist is himself the victim of a profound wound. Somewhere in childhood, a fracture occurred, a separation from the authentic self to survive. The child crafted a mask of perfection, brilliance, or dominance, because to be real was too dangerous. That mask hardened into the narcissistic persona, and beneath it, the true self withered in exile. Thus, the narcissist's hunger is the hunger of the abandoned inner child, crying for recognition, yet incapable of receiving love without distorting it. The empath, by contrast, has been trained by life to over-attune, to feel what others repress, to take into her body the emotions that others discard. She is porous, and this porousness is both her gift and her vulnerability. When such a one encounters the narcissist, it is as though two wounds recognize each other, the wound of abandonment and the wound of responsibility. And in this recognition, a fatal magnetism is born, but here lies the mystical paradox. What appears to be exploitation is also initiation. The empath is lured into this dark mirror, not to be destroyed, but to learn the art of boundaries, the sacred power of saying no, and the discovery that love without discernment is not love, but self-erasure. The narcissist becomes, unwittingly, a teacher. He is the shadow that forces the empath to confront her own shadow, the compulsion to save, to heal, to merge without limits. This is why the narcissist targets the empath first, because she carries the exact medicine that his unconscious craves, and he carries the exact challenge that her unconscious needs to face. Together, they enact a ritual of suffering that can lead either to enslavement or to awakening. Consider the symbol of the vampire, which has haunted our myths for centuries. The vampire cannot live without feeding on the life force of another, and his preferred victim is the one with the richest blood, the one whose spirit glows brightest in the night. This is no accident. The vampire archetype is the narcissist writ large. And who are the victims? They are those who hesitate to defend themselves, who open their veins in the hope that sacrifice will be transformed into love. Yet in every vampire tale, there is a deeper lesson. The victim must learn to recognize the predator, to hold up the cross of consciousness, to invoke the light that no shadow can consume. The empath's journey is no different. To awaken is to learn that compassion without wisdom is not divine, it is bondage. Dreams often present this conflict in symbolic form. A woman dreams of standing in a dark forest, pursued by a beast with many faces. Each time she tries to confront it, it vanishes, only to reappear behind her. Exhausted, she finally sits down and closes her eyes. In that moment, the beast dissolves, revealing a small, frightened child. This dream, which echoes countless inner experiences, reveals the truth of the narcissist. The beast is only a disguise, a mask created by fear, but the empath must first stop running, stop chasing, stop offering her strength as nourishment. Only when she claims her stillness does the mask fall. And the hidden child is revealed. To reach this moment, however, often requires a descent into the underworld of deception. Manipulation and pain, do not misunderstand me. I am not suggesting that one should remain in destructive relationships out of pity for the wounded child hidden within the narcissist. Compassion must not be confused with submission. True compassion sees the wound but refuses to become its fuel. The empath's task is not to save the narcissist, but to save herself from the illusion that she is responsible for his healing. This is where the mystical journey intersects with the psychological. The empath must retrieve her own projection, the unconscious belief that if she gives enough, sacrifices enough, she will finally be loved. In truth, this belief is the shadow of her own childhood wound. When love was conditional and survival required self-abandonment. Thus, the narcissist is a mirror not only of danger but of destiny, forcing the empath to reclaim the pieces of her soul that she gave away long ago. The question arises, How can one recognize when this archetypal dance is unfolding? The signs are subtle but unmistakable. The empath feels simultaneously exalted and drained. She experiences moments of ecstatic connection, as if she alone has been chosen to touch the narcissist's hidden depths. Yet soon after, she feels depleted, guilty, or confused. The relationship oscillates between idealization and devaluation, between being placed on a pedestal and being cast into the pit. This rhythm is not personal, it is archetypal. It is the rhythm of possession, the same rhythm found in myths of gods who lift mortals into ecstasy only to hurl them into despair. If you find yourself in such a rhythm, know that you are inside a myth enacted by the unconscious. And the only way out is to become conscious of the pattern itself. Let me speak more deeply about projection. When the empath encounters the narcissist, she often projects onto him the archetype of the wounded king, the one who could be healed by love, whose kingdom could be restored. If only someone believed in him. This projection blinds her to the reality of his exploitation. At the same time, the narcissist projects onto the empath the archetype of the perfect mother or inexhaustible healer, expecting her to endlessly provide what he cannot generate within. Thus, both are ensnared in projections, and both are prevented from seeing the other as they truly are. The path to liberation begins when the empath withdraws her projection, recognizing that the wounded king is not hers to heal, and the narcissist is forced, however reluctantly, to face the emptiness behind his mask. In mystical terms, this is the confrontation with shadow. The shadow is not evil in itself. It is simply what has been denied, repressed, or left unlived. The narcissist embodies a shadow inflated to monstrous proportions, while the empath embodies the opposite shadow, the refusal to claim her own power, her own right to boundaries and selfhood. Together they create a polarity, a circuit of energy that can either destroy or transform. If the empath awakens, she claims her shadow. She learns to say, I will no longer abandon myself for the sake of another. At that moment the circuit collapses, and the narcissist's power over her dissolves. She emerges not as a victim, but as an initiate, having passed through the fire and returned with wisdom. We must not romanticize this journey. It is painful, often shattering, to realize that one's love has been exploited, that one's empathy has been turned into fuel for another's emptiness, is to taste a bitter chalice. Yet this bitterness is medicinal. It teaches the empath the difference between compassion and codependency, between sacrifice and self-betrayal. Without this initiation, the empath remains forever vulnerable, forever drawn to those who consume her light. With it, she becomes a bearer of true power, able to love without losing herself, to serve without being enslaved. You may wonder why this lecture sounds more like myth and dream than like science. The reason is that the psyche speaks in symbols, not statistics. Narcissism and empathy are not merely clinical categories. They are living forces within the collective unconscious. Archetypes that shape the drama of human relationships. To understand them only as pathology is to miss their deeper significance. The narcissist is the shadow king, the mask of power that hides emptiness. The empath is the wounded healer, the chalice bearer whose gift becomes her curse until she learns to set boundaries. Their meeting is a mystery, a confrontation between light and shadow that calls forth transformation. When you see it in this way, your own suffering takes on meaning, and what once seemed senseless becomes initiation. The first step then is awareness. To see the pattern is already to weaken it. To name the archetype is to call it out of the shadows into the light of consciousness. This is why I say to you, do not fear the narcissist, nor despise the empath. See in their dance the eternal drama of the soul, seeking wholeness. See in your own pain the hand of the unconscious, guiding you towards the truth, that love without boundaries is not love, and that to give endlessly without receiving is to collude with your own destruction. When you grasp this, you begin to awaken from the spell, and the archetype releases its grip. When we gaze into this strange alchemy between narcissist and empath, we must not stop at the level of behavior alone, for behavior is but the outer garment of the psyche. Beneath the gestures of manipulation and the silent endurance of the empath lies a river of ancient images, myths that the soul remembers even if the conscious mind does not. The unconscious is never content to remain silent. It insists on reenactment. It insists that we live out dramas as old as humanity itself, in order that forgotten truth might rise again. This is why the empath feels that uncanny déjà vu, the sense that she has been here before, not only in this lifetime, but in countless unseen ones. It is the archetype of the sacrifice, the chalice bearer, being summoned to the altar once more. Why are empaths chosen first? Because the empath is a vessel already half filled with the world's grief. A vessel so porous that the pain of others flows in as easily as air. The narcissist, sensing this, attaches to her, not with affection, but with necessity. As a drowning man clutches driftwood, yet unlike driftwood, the empath gives warmth, resonance, life force. She feels what the narcissist cannot afford to feel. She carries his pain in her body, and this transfer is not metaphorical, it is psychical, energetic, almost sacramental, but this sacrament is inverted, a parody of communion. For instead of bread and wine freely given, it is the blood of her soul taken without consent. Still, even here lies hidden purpose, for through such violation, she may learn to transmute her suffering into wisdom, to recognize the shadow at last. You see, the narcissist and the empath do not meet in the daylight of the ego alone. They meet in the twilight between conscious and unconscious, where shadow and anima dwell. The narcissist is haunted by an inner void, the absence of the self, which he compensates with endless masks. The empath is haunted by an inner fear of worthlessness, which he compensates with endless giving. Each is incomplete, and each unconsciously seeks completion in the other, not realizing that the sword for wholeness lies only within. Thus they circle one another like planets bound by invisible gravity, pulled by forces neither can name. Their union is not chosen by logic, but compelled by the unconscious, which demands that what is hidden must be lived. In my work, I have often seen dreams that dramatize this encounter, a man dreams of a beautiful garden where every flower praises him. Yet when he bends down to smell them, he finds that their roots are dry, their petals brittle, and only the surface appears lush. A woman dreams of carrying an urn filled with water that never runs out. Though she herself grows weaker with every step, these dreams belong to different dreamers. Yet they mirror the same archetypal pattern, one who consumes reflection and one who provides without end. To the conscious mind, it appears as romance, even destiny. But to the unconscious, it is myth being reenacted, the myth of Narcissus, who fell in love with his own reflection, and the unnamed nymphs who wasted away in longing to be seen by him. When you live this myth in waking life, you are not only an individual, you are also a vessel for the collective unconscious acting itself out. But here I must pause and insist, the empath is not condemned. The unconscious does not lure her into this drama merely to destroy. Rather, it seeks to awaken in her the necessity of individuation. Individuation is not a comfortable process. It begins with collision, with disillusionment, with the shattering of the illusion that we are loved simply because we erase ourselves. The empath, confronted with the consuming hunger of the narcissist, must decide, will I disappear into this abyss, or will I reclaim the right to exist as a whole being? It is precisely the pressure of the narcissist's emptiness that forces the empath to turn inward, to discover the self she has long abandoned. Thus, what begins as a predatory encounter can become the spark of transformation. The narcissist, too, is caught in his own unconscious design. He targets the empath because she gives what he cannot generate within affirmation. Emotional resonance, the feeling of being alive. He clings to her, not out of love, but out of desperation. Because without her reflection, his mask crumbles, and the emptiness beneath threatens to consume him. Yet this strategy only deepens his exile from the self. For what he consumes cannot become his own. He remains a beggar dressed as a king, demanding tribute from those who enter his court. If ever he were to face the abyss within, to grieve the childhood self that was abandoned, he might begin his own journey toward individuation. But most will not, for the mask is too precious, too necessary. This is why so many narcissists remain unchanged, while the empath, through suffering, finds the courage to awaken. I have spoken of shadow, but let us look more closely. The empath's shadow is not cruelty or indifference. As she fears, her shadow is the right to exist without permission, the right to hold her own boundaries, the right to say no. She fears this shadow because in childhood she was taught that love is earned by care, that survival depends on pleasing others. To claim her shadow is to risk rejection, abandonment, the loss of belonging. And so she continues to give, to merge, to sacrifice, until she finds herself devoured. Only when the pain becomes unbearable does she turn to her shadow at last, discovering that within it lies her own power. She learns to say, I am not responsible for your emptiness. I will not feed you with my soul. At that moment, the archetypal spell begins to break, and what once seemed destiny reveals itself as initiation. Here lies a truth that few dare to face. The narcissist cannot devour what is no longer offered. He may rage, manipulate, threaten, but without the empath's complicity, he has no power. The vampire archetype dissolves when confronted with the light of consciousness. The empath who has learned to hold her own soul is no longer a prey. She becomes something new, something luminous, a person who can love without dissolving, who can serve without being consumed. This transformation is not merely psychological, it is alchemical. It is the transmutation of suffering into wisdom, the discovery that the gold of the soul is forged in the furnace of pain. The narcissist unwittingly becomes the catalyst of this alchemy, the dark teacher who forces the empath to awaken to her true self. Let us return to myth. For myth speaks more eloquently than analysis. In the story of Persephone, the maiden is abducted into the underworld by Hades, Lord of Shadows. At first, she is powerless, trapped in darkness, forced to eat the seeds of the pomegranate that bind her to that realm. Yet through this descent, she becomes queen of the underworld, no longer merely a maiden, but a sovereign who holds dominion over both death and rebirth. The empath's journey mirrors this. She is drawn into the underworld of the narcissist, devoured by his need, stripped of her innocence, but if she claims her power, she returns not as victim but as queen, one who has walked through shadow and emerged whole. This is the essence of individuation, not the avoidance of darkness, but its integration, the discovery that the self is larger than both light and shadow. You may ask, why does this drama repeat itself so often? Why do empaths seem fated to attract narcissists again and again? The answer lies in the unfinished business of the soul. Until the empath reclaims her shadow, she will unconsciously seek out those who embody it for her. She will be drawn to those who demand, who dominate, who consume, because they carry the power she has disowned. Each encounter is the unconscious attempting once more to bring the shadow into the light. Once she integrates it, once she learns that her worth is intrinsic and not dependent on sacrifice, the pattern dissolves. The narcissists may still exist, but they will no longer hold the same magnetism. The spell will be broken, and she will walk free. I have seen this countless times in analysis. A woman sits before me, tears streaming, saying, "Why do I always end up with men who use me, who drain me, who make me feel invisible?" And I answer not with judgment but with reverence, because your soul is asking you to learn what you have not yet claimed. It is asking you to see your shadow, to honor your boundaries, to know that you are worthy of love without erasing yourself. Slowly, painfully, she begins to understand. She withdraws her projection. She stops offering her life force as tribute, and in that moment she meets her own self. It is a birth, and like all births, it is accompanied by blood and pain. But it is also liberation. This is why I say, do not curse the narcissist. Though he wounds you, see him as an unwitting messenger of your own individuation. He is the shadow king who tests your sovereignty, the underworld guide who forces you to confront what you have denied. His presence in your life is a riddle posed by the unconscious, and the answer is not to heal him, but to heal yourself. Once you grasp this, you no longer see yourself as prey, but as a participant in a deeper mystery. You understand that suffering has meaning, that even betrayal can be transfigured into wisdom. And what of the narcissist does he to have a path to wholeness? Yes, but it is narrow, perilous, and rarely chosen. For him, the challenge is to remove the mask, to face the abyss, to grieve the abandoned child within. Few have the courage, for to remove the mask feels like death. Yet, without this death, there can be no rebirth. If ever he dares to descend into his own underworld, to weep for what was lost, to relinquish the illusion of perfection, then he too may find the self waiting in the darkness. But until then, he will continue to seek out empaths, mirrors in which to see himself, vessels to carry what he cannot bear. This is his tragedy, and it is not yours to resolve. So we arrive again at the mystery. Why are empaths targeted first? Because they are luminous, because they carry within them the very light the narcissist has lost, because their open hearts offer what his empty soul craves, but also because life itself uses this drama as a crucible, forging in the empath a strength she never knew she possessed. She is not targeted because she is weak, but because she is strong enough to survive, strong enough to awaken, strong enough to transform pain into wisdom. This is the secret. The unconscious hides within suffering, that what wounds us also awakens us, that what devours us can also deliver us, if only we dare to see. The soul is always striving toward wholeness, and wholeness cannot be achieved without confrontation. The empath's encounter with the narcissist is not a cruel trick of destiny, but the psyche's way of ensuring that she will no longer remain asleep to her own shadow. The unconscious knows that only through collision will the soul awaken. And so it arranges meetings that feel fated, encounters that pierce the very fabric of one's being. You may feel betrayed, shattered, bewildered, but if you look beneath these feelings, you will see that a deeper intelligence is at work. The narcissist is not the goal. The narcissist is the catalyst. The true goal is individuation, the integration of what you have long denied. Let me remind you that every archetypal drama contains both danger and possibility. When the empath encounters the narcissist, the danger is obvious: depletion, manipulation, psychological harm, but the possibility is more subtle: awakening, empowerment, transformation. One cannot exist without the other. Without danger, there is no initiation. Without possibility, there is no hope. This paradox lies at the center of the empath's journey. To awaken, she must first descend. To claim her sovereignty, she must first taste the bitterness of being used. And yet, if she perseveres, she will discover that what once seemed her weakness, her sensitivity, her openness, her compassion, can become her greatest strength when balanced by consciousness, a sink of fire. To the unprepared, it consumes, it destroys, it leaves only ashes. But to the wise, it purifies, it forges, it transforms raw ore into gold. The narcissist is such a fire. To stand too close without awareness is to be burned, but to stand consciously to endure the heat without surrendering one's essence, is to be forged into something indestructible. This is the secret of initiation. The empath must not run from the fire, nor throw herself into it blindly. She must learn to walk through it with open eyes, allowing it to burn away the illusions that kept her enslaved. Then, when she emerges, she will know that no one can steal her soul, for she has claimed it as her own. But how does one walk this path? The first step is recognition. To see the pattern is to weaken its hold. The empath must learn to notice the signs of exploitation, not with judgment, but with clarity. She must say, "This exaltation I feel, this euphoria of being needed, is not love, it is projection. This depletion I feel afterward is not my fault. It is the consequence of giving what was never mine to give." Such recognition is painful, for it shatters the fantasy that one can heal another by self-erasure. Yet without this shattering, no awakening is possible. The unconscious insists, better the pain of truth than the comfort of illusion. Once recognition dawns, the second step is withdrawal of projection. The empath must take back her own power. The energy she poured into the narcissist's mask. This is no small task, for projection is seductive. To believe that one's sacrifice can save another gives meaning, even nobility, to suffering. To withdraw that projection feels like betrayal, not of the narcissist, but of one's own identity. As healer, savior, giver, yet this identity is itself a mask, no less false than the narcissist's mask of grandeur. To withdraw projection is to face the terrifying possibility that love is not earned by sacrifice, that one is worthy simply by being. This is the threshold of individuation, where the old self dies and the new self is born. In dreams, this threshold often appears as a death motif. A woman dreams of being buried alive, only to claw her way out of the earth and see the sky for the first time. A man dreams of carrying a corpse through the forest, realizing at last that it is his own former self. These dreams are not morbid, they are symbolic of the death of illusion, the end of unconscious patterns. The empath, withdrawing her projection, feels as though a part of her is dying. And she is right. The part that dies is the self that believed survival depended on pleasing others. When this self dissolves, the authentic self has room to emerge, luminous and whole. But do not mistake individuation for isolation. To claim oneself does not mean to reject love or connection. It means to enter relationships as a whole being, not as a fragment seeking completion. The empath who has awakened can still love deeply, still serve, still offer compassion, but she does so from fullness, not from lack. She no longer confuses giving with being. She no longer allows her worth to be measured by another's hunger. In this way, her empathy becomes a gift rather than a curse, a power that nourishes without destroying. She becomes, in the true sense, and a healer, not one who sacrifices herself to save others, but one who embodies wholeness and thereby awakens it in others. Let us look again at the narcissist. He may continue to target empaths, drawn by their light, compelled by his emptiness. But the empath who has awakened is no longer a mirror for his mask. She reflects back not his grandeur but his void, not his fantasy but his wound. This reflection is unbearable, and he will often flee, seeking another mirror. Yet, in rare moments, this confrontation may crack his mask, forcing him to glimpse the abandoned child within. Whether he turns toward healing or returns to illusion is his choice. It is not the empath's responsibility. She has fulfilled her role by ceasing to collude with his deception. This, too, is compassion. To refuse to feed the illusion, even if it means being rejected. There is a strange irony here. The empath fears that setting boundaries will make her unlovable, that saying no will mean abandonment. Yet in truth, only by setting boundaries does she discover authentic love. For love cannot exist where one is devoured. Love requires two whole beings meeting in mutual recognition. Without boundaries, the empath is not truly seen, only consumed. With boundaries, she becomes visible at last, not as a mirror, but as a self. And in that visibility, love becomes possible. This is the paradox of individuation. By daring to separate, one discovers true union. The spiritual traditions of the world have long intuited this paradox. Mystics speak of the dark night of the soul, where one feels abandoned, emptied, stripped of all illusions. This night is not punishment, but purification. It is the death of false attachments, the dissolution of projections, the stripping away of all that is not the self. The empath's encounter with the narcissist is such a night. She feels abandoned, drained, unseen. Yet, if she endures, if she resists the temptation to flee back into illusion, she will emerge into a dawn where she is whole. Then her empathy is no longer compulsion, but choice, no longer bondage, but freedom. You may ask, is this not too mystical, too symbolic for what is essentially a psychological dynamic? But psychology divorced from symbol is lifeless. The unconscious does not speak in clinical terms, it speaks in images, in myths, in archetypes. To truly understand the bond between narcissist and empath, we must see it in this light. It is not merely pathology, it is drama, initiation, transformation. It is the psyche's way of teaching what cannot be taught by reason alone. And so I speak to you in this language, not to obscure, but to illuminate. For only when you see your suffering as part of a larger story can you endure it without despair. The empath's journey, then, is the journey of the hero. She begins in innocence, drawn by love, lured by the narcissist's mask. She descends into darkness, devoured by his emptiness, stripped of her illusions. She confronts her shadow, discovers her boundaries, reclaims her self, and she emerges transformed, so für ein whole. This is the archetypal path of individuation, played out in the theater of relationship. It is not an easy path, but it is a necessary one, for without it, empathy remains a wound. With it, empathy becomes wisdom. And so I say to you, if you find yourself targeted, drained, deceived, do not despair. You are not weak. You are chosen by the unconscious for a deeper initiation. The very pain you feel is the fire that will forge you. The very emptiness you encounter is the mirror that will reveal your own fullness. Trust this process. Painful though it is, do not curse the darkness, for it is shaping you into one who can carry light without being consumed. This is why narcissists target empaths first, because in doing so, they unwittingly awaken the very power that will one day transcend them. When the soul begins to understand its own patterns, there arises a profound shift. The empath, once bewildered by the endless repetition of betrayal, now sees with clarity that she was never cursed by chance, but chosen by the unconscious to undergo a particular initiation. This recognition transforms the narrative from victimhood into destiny. She begins to sense that her sensitivity, which once seemed a burden, is in truth a sacred instrument. She can perceive the hidden currents beneath words, the unspoken wounds behind gestures, the silent cries buried in other shadows. But now, instead of drowning in these currents, she learns to navigate them with discernment. Empathy without discernment is bondage. Empathy with discernment is wisdom. Why, then, does this matter so deeply in the context of the narcissist? Because the narcissist embodies the shadow of our age. He is the mask of power without substance, the appearance of grandeur without soul, the triumph of persona over self. He is the reflection of a culture that worships image over essence, applause over authenticity, and the empath, with her luminous heart, becomes the first target because she still carries what he has lost, the living connection to feeling, to soul, to the currents of the unconscious. In this sense, the drama is not only personal but collective. It is the meeting of two cultural archetypes, the hollow mask and the overgiving heart. Their collision exposes the sickness of the age, but also reveals the medicine hidden within. When I speak of individuation, I do not mean a solitary withdrawal from the world. I mean the integration of the opposites within, so that one becomes whole and capable of meeting life as it is. The empath's individuation requires that she integrates strength with sensitivity, boundaries with compassion, selfhood with service. Only then can she move beyond the polarity of victim and predator, giver and taker. She becomes a whole person, no longer compelled to repeat the same myth unconsciously. In this way, her liberation contributes not only to her own healing, but to the healing of the collective. For every soul that becomes conscious ripples outward into the world. You may feel, as you listen, that this is not mere psychology, but a kind of prophecy, and indeed, it is, for the unconscious always speaks prophetically. It reveals through dreams, symbols, and encounters what must be faced if humanity is to evolve. The epidemic of narcissistic relationships is not an accident. It is the unconscious dramatizing before us the dangers of a world that has lost connection with soul. The empath's suffering is not meaningless. It is the voice of the unconscious crying out, "Awaken, remember, reclaim yourself." And if she heeds this voice, she becomes not only healed, but also a herald of a new way of being. Let us imagine a vision, a hall of mirrors once more, but now the empath walks with steady gaze. She does not hold the mirror of her being to reflect the narcissist's mask. Instead, she carries her mirror turned inward, gazing into the depths of her own soul. Around her the masks clamor, demanding reflection, begging for fuel, but she does not respond. She sees them for what they are, empty shells, disguises hiding wounds. She does not hate them, nor does she pity them. She simply walks past, holding her mirror of consciousness steady until she comes to a door at the end of the hall. Behind that door lies not another mask, but a garden, alive, blooming, radiant with authenticity. This is the symbol of individuation. The empath, no longer bound to the cycle of reflection and depletion, steps into her own life, her own wholeness. In this new life, love takes on a different form. It is not the desperate merging of two wounds, but the meeting of two selves. It is not fueled by sacrifice, but by reciprocity. The empath learns that she can be loved not for what she gives, but for who she is. And the narcissist, if ever he dares to remove his mask, may one day discover that love does not require performance, that he too can be seen as he truly is. But whether he takes that path is not the empath's concern. Her task is to live her own wholeness, to embody the wisdom won through suffering. The question remains, how does one embody this wisdom in daily life? By practicing the small acts of sovereignty, saying no when one means no, speaking truth even when it risks rejection, resting when one is weary instead of pushing on to please another. These are not trivial gestures, they are sacred rituals. Each act of self-affirmation is a declaration to the unconscious. I choose to live as a whole being. Each act of boundary setting is an invocation of the self, a refusal to return to the old patterns of self-erasure. In this way, individuation is lived not in grand proclamations, but in the quiet, daily courage of honoring one's soul. Perhaps you will ask, what becomes of empathy once transformed? Does it harden into indifference? No. On the contrary, it becomes more luminous, more powerful, because it is no longer tainted by fear. The awakened empath does not absorb others' pain unconsciously. She perceives it clearly, she feels it deeply, but she knows where she ends and the other begins. She can stand with another in suffering without being consumed by it. She can love without losing herself. This is empathy in its truest form, not sacrifice, not martyrdom, but the radiant presence of one who knows herself and therefore can see others as they are. And so the mystery of why narcissists target empaths first is revealed. They target them because empaths shine with the very qualities they have lost, because empaths are the mirrors in which their masks come alive. But beneath this apparent tragedy lies initiation. The empath, through being targeted, is forced to confront her shadow, to claim her sovereignty, to awaken to her self. The narcissist becomes the unwilling midwife of her transformation, the dark figure who drives her into the depths where gold is hidden. In this way, even suffering is redeemed, for it becomes the doorway to wholeness. As I draw these reflections to a close, I leave you with this. Your suffering has meaning. Your wounds are not proof of weakness, but evidence of initiation. If you have been targeted, drained, betrayed, do not despair. See in it the hand of the unconscious, guiding you toward individuation. Withdraw your projections, reclaim your soul. and know that you are whole, then your empathy will no longer be a curse but a crown, a light that shines not to be consumed but to illuminate, and in that light you will walk free, not as victim, not as prey, but as one who has faced the shadow and emerged sovereign. This is the gift hidden in the drama, the treasure buried in the wound. This is why the narcissist targets the empath first, because through this trial, the empath is destined to awaken to her own eternal self